Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping right inside the high-stakes world of a parole hearing. We're going to be digging into the official transcript of a man convicted of a brutal murder 30 years ago. And really, our goal is to understand that one critical question the parole board faces. How do you know, really know, if a person has truly changed?
This one line from the prosecutor just hangs over the entire hearing. It's so stark, so chilling. It's a reminder that behind all the legal talk and psychological jargon, there was a hammer, and there was a victim. This really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack.
So to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start right there in the hearing room, then we'll rewind back to the crime itself. After that, we'll try to get inside the offender's head, we'll hear from the victim's family, and finally, we'll look at exactly how the board made its decision.
All right, let's dive in. Our story doesn't actually begin in 1988 when the crime was committed. No, it starts 30 years later in a pretty sterile hearing room at the California healthcare facility.
So this is it. This is the moment of truth for inmate Bienvenido Lugo. He's been behind bars for over 30 years, and now he has to convince 2 commissioners that he is no longer a threat. And think about their job. It's huge. They have to somehow peel back 3 decades of prison life and figure out who this man really is today. And this, right here, is what it all boils down to. Is the change we're seeing genuine? Is it real, deep-seated remorse? Or is this just a performance, something he's learned to say and do to get out? That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve, using the exact words spoken in that room. Now, to understand the challenge the board is facing, we have to go back to the crime. But here's the thing. They're not just looking at a simple set of facts. They're actually weighing 2 completely different stories about what happened that day. Okay, so first, let's get the undisputed facts out of the way. On May 7th, 1988, Lugo went into his former landlord's apartment, and he was armed with a hammer. He attacked the 81-year-old woman. Then, police just happened to knock on the door, and he struck her again. Mary Graham actually clung to life for 13 months before she died from her injuries, which is why Lugo was convicted first for assault and then later for her murder.
And this is where the 2 stories just completely split. Lugo says he was just trying to knock her out so he could escape. He frames it as this calculated, almost detached act. But the prosecution? They see it completely differently. For them, it was a brutal, selfish act where his only priority was silencing the one person who could identify him. So this leads us to maybe the most critical part of the whole hearing, trying to get inside the offender's mind. For anyone studying forensics, this is where you're really looking for the tells. The board is basically hunting for credibility, for consistency. They're trying to figure out if 30 years has actually changed the man or if it's just changed his story. Okay, so let's look at a key inconsistency. Check this out. Back in his 2013 hearing, they asked him why he committed all those burglaries in his past. His answer was direct: the need for money to obtain drugs. Simple, clear, a motive. But now, fast forward to 2019, and his story is completely different. Now he says it was all about survival, food, rent. He doesn't even mention drugs until his own lawyer basically corners him with what he said before. Now for a parole board, that's not just a red flag. That's a full-blown credibility crisis. You're going to hear this word insight a lot. And it's so crucial to understand what the board means by it. Insight isn't just saying, "I'm sorry." It's the ability to actually dissect your own actions, to understand the twisted thinking that led you to the crime in the first place, and to really, truly grasp the devastation you caused. Without that, the board just can't trust that you won't do it again. Lugo's claim about how he's rehabilitated himself is also, it's pretty unusual. He says he's basically ditched programs like Narcotics Anonymous and that a personal, spiritual state of being has cured him. This creates a huge problem for the board, right? How do you verify a change that has no paper trail, no proof? How can you be sure it's real and not just a convenient story? And then you have this statement, which he told a psychologist right before the hearing. He says he's on his last tour of duty and he's going to retire from seeking parole. So, what do you do with that? Is this genuine resignation from a guy who's just tired, sick, and has been in the system forever? Or is it a really subtle manipulation designed to make him seem defeated and therefore not a threat? But, amidst all this focus on the offender, the hearing serves another absolutely vital purpose. It's the place where the victim, Mary Graham, gets a voice. It's where her story is told, so she doesn't just get lost in all the legal paperwork.
81. Let's just pause on that number for a second. That's how old Mary Graham was. She was a vibrant woman living on her own when her life was just violently torn apart.
This detail, read from her daughter's statement, it's just devastating. It proves Mary Graham wasn't just some anonymous victim. She was a conscious witness to her own brutal attack. For the board and for us, this brings the raw human horror of the crime right into that sterile hearing room. And her son just nails it here. He makes it so clear that this wasn't an elderly woman at the end of her days. This was a healthy, vital person who probably had decades of life left. So the crime wasn't just a murder, it was the theft of 20 years from her and from her family.
So the hearing is over. The board has heard it all. The conflicting stories, the claims of a spiritual cure, and the powerful, painful testimony from the victim's family. Now they have to decide.
And the decision came back: parole denied. The board was not convinced. They concluded that even after 30 years, Bienvenido Lugo still posed an unreasonable risk to public safety.
And their reasoning was incredibly clear and systematic. They said he still lacked that true insight into what made him so violent. They pointed out how he downplayed his drug problem. They felt his remorse was shallow, that he couldn't really grasp the suffering he'd caused. And finally, a recent violation for having a cell phone showed them that his criminal thinking was still there.
And this is the ultimate lesson here, especially for anyone studying forensics. The board kept asking Lugo, why? Why was this burglary different from all your other ones? Why the hammer? Why this level of violence? And his answer, again and again, was basically, I can't answer that. That inability to deconstruct the why, that is the single biggest red flag a parole board can see.
And so we're left with this fundamental, messy question that this whole case just lays bare. A person's inner change, it's ultimately unknowable. So how can any system, any board, truly tell if it's real? It's the constant tightrope walk of our justice system, balancing the hope for rehabilitation against the absolute duty to keep the public safe. And there is no easy answer.